Good morning, colleagues. Thank you and a warm welcome to you all to the POCO SA Ponder virtual presentation series. We will commence with a short presentation lasting about 30 minutes, a question and answer session of 10 minutes, and conclude with a lucky prize draw. You are welcome to field questions in the chat box during the presentation, and we will be answering the questions at the end. This morning, Lee Naik will enlighten us on a trendy and very interesting topic, gearing up for uncertainty. In this Ponder presentation, Lee will explore key consumer, business, and technology trends from the last 18 months, powered by TransUnion's insights. He will share ideas that we should be aware of that will help individuals and businesses drive their relevance and growth in this ever-changing world. Lee Naik is the Chief Executive Officer of TransUnion Africa and is recognized as one of South Africa's leading digital and technology transformation experts. Lee is responsible for a portfolio of businesses across 8 countries that help businesses make decisions that are more informed and help consumers manage their personal information better to lead a higher quality of life. Lee is a visionary and thought leader on real-world digital trends, challenges, and solutions. He is a frequent speaker and commentator and was recognized as a global top 10 technology commentator in the inaugural LinkedIn Top Voice Awards. Thank you, Lee, and welcome.
Thank you, Aya, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. As I get my presentation up and running, and we have quite a few people joining the session, what I would say, I'm very, very happy to take any questions you have today, and I'll be able to either answer that in the session. I'm very, very open to receiving your questions via email or via LinkedIn or whichever preference you have. So very, very keen to do that today and to help you tackle this topic. As you've heard from Aya, today's topic is around gearing up for uncertainty. And I guess as my presentation loads, everything about where we are right now is uncertain. So a key part of my presentation is to help you understand what's going on around us and to give you some perspective as to what we should be doing. I'm hopeful that many of you will be representing either small business, large business, government, or even your own capacity. And I'm hoping that presentation talks to you. Before we get going, Aya, can you confirm that you can in fact see my presentation, please?
Hi, Lee. Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. So just by way of formal introduction, I'm the CEO of TransUnion Africa, the largest, I guess, the original credit bureau in Africa, started in the year 1901. I've been in the business for around 5 years, joined in January 2017, and my background is actually technology transformation. I've spent almost 20 years in my career helping businesses and government transform to be relevant in the digital world. And all that sounds very fancy. Even though I spoke about me as a technologist, you'll find very, very few technology references in my slideware today because it isn't meant to be about technology. We have a lot going on around us that's a lot more important. So if something is confusing, do reach out to me. I've put up my LinkedIn and my Twitter profile on this slide. I have a newsletter called Alewa, where I unpack these topics in much more detail, which can get sent directly to you if you subscribe. But as I mentioned, you'll have my email address at the end of the presentation to reach out. So what does it mean to gear up for uncertainty? Is there something happening around us that we aren't vehemently aware of? And I guess the point is that there is a lot of uncertainty happening right now. For one, we're still in the COVID pandemic. I remember my last flight coming from the US back to South Africa in March 2020, nervous as hell as to what this all meant for me, my family, and for our economy. Some 18 months later, it clearly is still uncertain. We're talking about now having lots of supply of vaccines in our country. We're talking about increasing vaccination rates, but there's a lot of hesitancy going on right now. And that's just the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, things were tough. We had low single-digit GDP growth forecasted for our country. We have one of the highest income inequalities in the world, measured by an index we refer to as the income Gini. South Africa has an income Gini of 0.63, which is the highest of any country in the world, which talks about the disparity between those that have and those that don't have, right? When you talk about unemployment, just this last week, the Q2 results from the labor force survey came up, and it said that we now have the highest unemployment at 34.4%, rising from 32.6%. As a bureau, we see all the data around how ordinary South Africans are surviving the pandemic and what we are doing and able to do or not do. Almost 75% of our disposable incomes as consumers are spent servicing debt. We asked for lots of payment holidays, and now we're struggling. 1 out of every 5 people since the start of the pandemic have lost their jobs. 1/3 of SMMEs, micro and medium specifically, have had to shut their businesses down over the last 18 months. Is there uncertainty? There's absolutely uncertainty. And I guess we have a couple options in front of us as leaders, as individuals, as businesses, as government. When we think about what we have in front of us, we can be like an ostrich and hide in the sand, stay indoor like this bulldog and hope for better days. Or we can start to think about what is happening in this new world. Some people may say to you that the last big pandemic was 100 years ago, and there's one before that, and in good time, these things will go away. My presentation today is not to be negative, but it's important for us to create a burning platform for us to resonate around. This purchasing consortium, if you're an attendee here, it's about how we've come together as a group of people to have a singular view of how we can participate in something called the sharing economy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So how do we thrive? Not just survive, because surviving means we're going to make do. What are some of the things happening around us that we should consider and become au fait with as we think about our personal strategies? How do you wake up in the morning and motivate yourself when it seems quite depressing, working from home or going into the work and being worried about vaccines, worrying about the next paycheck? What are some of the things that we can start to think about that's happening around us that could help us think differently about the choices we make in our businesses, how we lead, how we engage? These are all important things. The biggest thing I would say to you in all of everything I've mentioned, the role of humanity should not be underestimated. We need to think about how we as humans are more human to each other, how we play a role in lifting up our entire country. Some 27 years later, we have a lot of work to do. If any of my indices that I referred to earlier are things to go from, that's a burning platform, not to tuck our tails between our legs and run away and leave, but to say we are challenged. The question is, what should we be thinking about from a strategy or policy? What should we do differently as businesses? And how should we show up as humans in our human interactions? So over the next few slides, I'll cover some of these key thoughts, and a lot of the detail is available via the newsletter I mentioned earlier. So the biggest trend I would say to us is that purpose becomes core. In fact, I've been talking about purpose becoming core for a long, long time. So what does purpose becoming core really mean? It means that during the COVID pandemic right now, you've had a chance to reflect around what's important to you. Maybe 18 months ago, maybe 20 months ago, you were thinking about that new car because your 3-year-old car felt too old and you had to have a new car. You were thinking about a holiday that you had to go to. You were thinking about, man, why do I spend so much time at home with the kids? I love entertaining. I love going out with my friends. Shouldn't I do more of that? These are some of the things that we've been thinking about. And as we consider the pandemic, it has given us what we call pause for reflection. It's given us a perspective that said the things that were important to us as individuals, because it starts with us, it starts with me, right? Prior to the pandemic has inevitably changed. In my career, I've spent most of my time in transformation work, so 16 to 20 hours a day. And I hardly ever spend time with my kids, if I'm honest. I look after 8 different countries in my current business. I'm always flying around somewhere. In the pandemic, I realized, what if it's the last day with my wife and my kids? When was the last time I drove my kids to school? What if I don't have that opportunity? When we think about this, we then start to think about, if my wellness, my health is what's important to me, not the materialistic stuff that's available to me, how do I start to think about businesses And how should businesses start to show up in this new world? Kantar Research does something called the Trust Barometer. And what they found in their most recent research was that 85% of people want businesses to help solve their problems, not to solve our problems. So if I'm selling products, it's all about me selling products to make revenue. But if I can line up what I do, so whether it's Percosa, whether it's TransUnion, whether it's the SA government, whether it's a private bank, right, is what I'm doing communicative of what problems exist in society. If you think about the challenges we have, whether it's the unrest that happened a few weeks ago, whether it's the pandemic and the relief that's required, whether it's funding to help transform our country or to get that inequality addressed, what are those things? The first thing from this presentation is that the role of the consumer has forever changed. Businesses that sit behind boardrooms say, that's the strategy, that's what consumers want. We are mistaken. We've always been told that consumers are kings and consumers are queens, but now they've got the true power. They're not leaving their houses. They're not driving around, walking to physical stores as much as they used to. They're not seeing the billboards because they're not driving. How do you get to their hearts and their minds? Starting to understand what they want. And what Kantar says is that, number one, 85% of people want brands, businesses, entities, local, international, the fashion store you buy from, the retailer, to stand for something more than just revenue. The second thing, they believe that brands should have a responsibility in solving society's problems. So we have challenges as a society. Are we just about the P&L and the listing of the company? Are we genuinely trying to make a difference? And more, you're going to hear people say to you when you talk to your customers, are you tone deaf? Are you not really seeing what's going on? And that's an important thing. Now, our employees, if you're an employer, your employees are the first test of whether you can resonate with what's going on. Whether they're working from home or working physically, we've got new challenges. Are we applying the same pressures that we did prior to the pandemic? Have we changed the way we show up as businesses, being cognizant of the changing dynamic, the pressures they feel? You're hearing more and more people are becoming physically sick. They're having mental breakdowns. They're having wellness crises. Are we becoming aware of what's going on? So the first trend to note is that purpose is not becoming core. Purpose is core. 7 out of 10 people in the research I referred to earlier said that they don't actually buy stuff based on the billboards and the advertising. They're starting to understand what their brand stands for. So the first question for every one of you is, what do you stand for? What is your purpose? What is the purpose of your entity? Does it stand for something that's believable in? Is it something that people can subscribe to? Does that make sense to you? You'll see more and more people evolving how they show up. Businesses will choose to do business with other businesses, not just because of their great P&L and their reputation. What do you stand for? So the first question for today is, what do you stand for? So you need to reflect on that as you think about our future relevance. The second big thing, and this sounds quite fancy, it's called the hyper-connected reality. If you went on the internet prior to the pandemic, chances are you are. Chances are that Lee's mom in Chatsworth in Durban, South Africa, she's on the internet, she's got a fiber line, she never had it before. She suddenly figured out how the internet works. She's now got a smartphone and she's now figuring things out by herself, because whether it's social interaction or entertainment or transacting, and she's 75 years old, we've got to find ways to connect. So the hyper-connected reality is really interesting. What it says to us is that the ways that we behave prior to the pandemic has forever changed. So let's make it real for you. During the pandemic or prior to the pandemic, a lot of us would go into a physical financial institution to actually transact. In the latest TransUnion digital fraud analysis that I'm currently presenting on media about, we found that 60% of consumers are concluding their financial transactions online via mobile app, right, and via their website or some other mechanism that their bank allows them to connect with. This is now the way we work. The way I message Aya and say, Aya, if the tick is blue, I've read your message. That's instant gratification that she's been heard or I've been heard is what I expect of businesses. So in a hyper-connected world, we now expect businesses and governments to show up in different ways. When I have a stress, when I'm having a breakdown, I don't have my breakdown in office hours. I have my breakdown maybe whenever I can't handle the duress anymore. Maybe it's at 2 in the morning. Can we afford as businesses to keep office hours? Are we now going to embrace new ways of working? The business I work for is a business that deals with negative information. People that call our organization are struggling. 75% of our disposable income goes towards servicing debt. People are calling us to talk about default and judgments and what can I do? And in many cases, it's too late and we try to help recover. In that digital world, that cycle is not 8 to 5. It doesn't keep your 8 or 9 hour day. It keeps 24 hours. As you think about your favorite delivery store, you're now hearing you can call your order in, pick it up without physically coming to the store, delivery just outside, delivery to your home. The hyper-connected reality means that things will change. During the first 6 months of the pandemic, we did some research around where people spending their money in terms of physical in-store with retailers and banks, or they're starting to migrate to some of these intermediaries, whether it's the Takealots, the Mr. Deliveries, the Zandos. We actually found that almost 45% of transactions in this 3-month period that we monitored, because we see the actual data on the Bureau, almost 45% of transactions had moved over to some of these intermediaries. Now, I'd ask you the question, if I'm scared to leave my house and I'm worried about the pandemic and the virus, and I'm saying to myself, my priorities have changed. Do I want to be enticed by a physical billboard? Do I want to be advertised by advertising? Or will I stay laser focused on my core priorities? And will I then start to say, maybe I don't go back to a physical retailer. Maybe I don't go back to a physical bank, which then forces the banks and the retailers to think differently. So you think about the hyper-connected reality. The question is, this is now a lot more mature. Since 2010, when we had the World Cup in South Africa, we've had a massive investment in infrastructure that connects us as humans. So when we talk about the National ICT White Paper that contemplates a digital society that could really overcome the challenges that we still have in our country as a legacy of what we experienced during apartheid, connecting people beyond rivers in the lack of infrastructure. So the question for you is, in a hyper-connected world, can you reimagine, not re-engineer, not make it quicker or faster? Could you reimagine how your business could show up in a world that's hyper-connected? So Lee doesn't leave his house. Lee's not leaving anywhere. If you entice Lee, you've got to put up a billboard in his house and get to him. You've got to find a way to understand his needs, but he's not leaving his house. The rules have changed. So in a hyper-connected reality, the question to you is, how are you showing up as an individual? Are you embracing this new reality? Are you finding a way to make these endless Zoom and Teams calls work? Are you finding a way to keep balance? More importantly, if this is how business will be conducted and how new competitors will come in from overseas, from different disruptive industries, what will you be doing to disrupt yourselves before it happens? And this word I've used is really important. I used the word reimagination. I didn't say strategize. I didn't say re-engineer. If you had to start from scratch with a blank piece of paper, how would you achieve the outcome, not the output, the outcome you seek? So if the outcome is to drive financial inclusion, if the outcome is to help people become well, if the outcome is to help people become more educated, right? If that's the outcome, guess what? Competitions come. As an example, education. I, like most of us, have gone to a university or some training college. Now you can go online. The best universities are making their content available free of charge on places like Coursera, edX, Singularity, the Khan Academy. In South Africa, you can log on to LinkedIn, for example, and get access to some of this content. So contemplate yourself, what could a reimagined state look like? What could that be like in this next new world? So let's move on in the interest of time. So the next slide is called the composable digital enterprise. Now, once again, it sounds fancy, but it's as simple as Lego blocks. When we think about how we show up in our organizations, when you think about your organization and what you do, if I asked your business, what are you really good at doing? And what are you not so good at doing? And if we had an honest conversation one, and you said, Lee, listen, I'm actually not so good at this payroll thing. And I stopped and said, okay, let's just for a second, no arguments. If that's the position you have, would it be possible for you to find somebody that's better than you are at payroll, that can do it cheaper, better, or faster? And could you find a way to put that together, like Lego blocks, right? And that's interesting because you may say, Lee, it's so special. This what I do, nobody does better. And I would say that we've got to think about this composable enterprise like Lego blocks. In the end, you want to build a house. You're going to build a wonderful thing that's on the picture that came in the box. Now, in the box are lots and lots of pieces, as you can imagine. There are things that you may have in your house. It could be the table, it could be the chair, it could be the right environment. There's no kids, there's no babies, you're good to go. Lego has provided stuff in a box and there's a bunch of instructions. So the way to explain this to you from what we're expecting to happen and what's happening right now, even in our own organization, I've asked the guys and the girls, why are you doing what we're so bad at doing? Why can't we partner? So there's a gentleman called Simon Sinek, and he wrote a book called Start With Why. And like a small kid, they always ask of their parents, Daddy or Mommy, tell me why. Why am I doing something? When we think about this composable enterprise and our future relevance is difficult because we're going to grow our businesses, earn revenues, we're going to increase margins and profitabilities. And at the same time, people are saying cut cost. And you're saying to yourself, but Lee, I've got to protect jobs. I've got to grow the business. Where do I start? And as a guy that spent most of his career helping transform other businesses, I would say the first thing to do is to actually slow down and step back and say, let me consider what's in front of me. So Simon Sinek talks about the why followed by the what, and the what followed by the how. So what does that mean? In my example of Lego, the how, right, is a set of instructions in the box accompanied by a little set of widgets, right? In fact, if you lose your widget, you can look at the book and say, I want piece A9. You can go to the Lego store and say, I'd like to buy 2 blocks of A9, and you've got the how. Did you start manufacturing or buy a 3D printer because you needed to complete it? No, you go to the shop and say, I want piece A9. A9 is a modular, repeatable thing. It always comes in blue and it always looks the same way. Why would you start from scratch, right? If I flip to KFC, use a fast food example, we all know that Colonel Sanders had 11 herbs and spices. Do we know what the 11 herbs and spices are when we buy our KFC? Do we know where he bought it from, or where did he say, is it Woolworths or Pick and Pay, or you have to have it organically farm grown? We don't know. The first thing is we're hungry. We walked into a fast food, presumably because we want quick food to pacify our need, right? The what is the Streetwise 2, the Streetwise 5, the spicy zinger, whatever you want, that pacifies or meets our need. We never stop once to ask about the how. Where did the chicken come from? Was it Farmer Brown? Was it Rainbow? Does KFC have their own chicken? Do the chickens have heads? We don't know. We never stop. And the real point I'm trying to make using my silly examples is that in the world we live in, we seek outcomes. If you're a shareholder, you're looking for revenue, you're looking for margin. If you're a citizen, I want value from my government. I want value in terms of money. It's difficult. I'm struggling to meet my needs. When we think about that, they're going to consider the question of if why is the objective, the vision of your company. If you have the recipe like Colonel Sanders did, why do you keep doing the modular Lego pieces, the A9s and the A11s and the B12s? And the question to ask is, if you're under pressure to be more effective and more efficient, can you partner for success? Now, in the previous slide, I mentioned the high levels of connectivity, this hyper-connected reality. There are things that you can do today that you couldn't do before. In my business, we work with 5,000 clients, right? 5,000 clients. I don't talk to everyone every day. We are connected to what they need. We deliver the services they need. If my services goes down, guess what? I'm gonna get a call and I'm gonna get screamed at. That's the reality of the digital world. I want it now. I want it to work. I want to be happy. So this trend is important. It's a very businessy trend versus a technology trend. The tech part's the easy part. Things like APIs and automation and connectivity, don't let that confuse us. The real question for us is, can we reimagine a world where we can achieve the outcomes by partnering? Can we empower entrepreneurs? Can you find net new ways of working? That's what the composable enterprise is about. The next trend is called analytics at the edge. The thing on the screen in front of you is not a weird robot. It's actually something called a Viomi V3 vacuum cleaner. And it's really interesting because South Africa has now got this massive vacuuming robot thing. There's an iRobot, and then there's the Viomi that's available from Xiaomi. And what's interesting about this robot, if you don't know it, and the thing on the top of its head that looks like eyes is actually a LiDAR sensor. When you put this on, it goes around your house. It actually maps out everything and tells you after a couple hours, Lee, I've mapped your house. Would you like to label your rooms? And it'll say to you, okay, I figured out there's a step there. I'm not going to fall over. I've marked that as a caution, so you don't need to worry about it. And if you did want to vacuum, and these are pricey things right now, but this is the technology that's coming because of the hyper-connected reality, because of the pressure on digital and commoditization and competition. You now have 2 such devices in South Africa. This device, if something falls on the ground, you can deploy from an app and say, go off and sweep that area, mop that area, return to your charging station. The real point I'm making here is in a connected world, the internet that we talk about will start to become more invisible. It won't be a Teams meeting where I'm on the screen in front of you. It's going to start to be in objects. It's going to start to give us more useful information. It's going to start to tell us it's hot, it's cold. Focus the limited police delivery services on these 3 hotspot areas. If you have charitable donations to give due to the unrest, why can't we get insights about what's happening out there? Now, in this hyper-connected world, we all have devices, whether it's an iPhone like the one I've got, whether it's a Samsung device, whether it's a no-branded device from Pick n Pay or FNB or some other bank, it actually doesn't matter. We are becoming hyper-connected in this new world, which means there's new behaviors, there's new lessons to be learned. We know that our healthcare providers are offering us Fitbits and Apple devices to contemplate how we can become better. Why are they doing that? Because we can genuinely become better, because a sick Lee is more costly for my medical aid. It feels like a good reciprocation of value. So earlier when I talked about trust, we're going to have the choices as individuals. In an era of POPIA, the protection of personal information, which we're all subject to as businesses, can I exchange value in return for accessing Lee's information? Can I know more about a farming community to know that this is the best seed to plant at the right time? Is this all theory, or is there reality in it? I've had to work with some of these technologies for well over 15 years. This is real. I actually have one of these robots in my house. I got one a while ago just to figure out how real is this thing. And all the stuff they say in the brochure, it works. You're able to do all the stuff it says. It's very expensive and doesn't make business sense in my view. But the real point is that analytics is starting to become available to us as leaders. And when you think about insights-powered leadership, that's the real point. What if you could know that your employees were not feeling well? What if you know that your employees were struggling with productivity by getting the right insights to you when you needed it? If you're making a decision to enter a country or to leave a country, if you're looking to make a decision about whether to go to Durban or stay in Joburg this weekend, if you're deciding where to spend the few money you have on what product choice do you make, can you use insights? Now, here's the point about analytics. I've mentioned lots of very golden threads, hyper-connected reality. I talked about how we've got to decompose things and partner. Maybe there are things that your business needs, that you need today that you don't have, like KFC. Maybe your time, your oregano is something you don't have. Are you opening up yourself to say, I don't understand why people don't like me? Get a view, get a perspective, own the view, whether it's negative or positive. We need to own the reality and make choices. Every choice we make with our limited disposable income will affect our relevance. Remember what I said at the beginning? Almost 1/3 of all SMMEs have told us that they closed down in the last 18 months. 20% of consumers we spoke to told us they either lost their jobs or their work hours have been reduced. It's tough out there. So if you as a business leader, as a leader of a company, as an employee, if you could make one choice or 2 choices, are you using the insights that are now more readily available? I do it in my company. There are things that we did 100 years ago that we are bad at doing. Stop doing it. Who can we partner with? That's how I met Selvin and Percosa. They're better at doing things in certain areas than I am. Why wouldn't I partner for success? That's what success looks like. Being vulnerable to say, I can't do everything, and asking, how can I do more as a partnership? In the end, It's the outcome that matters. So security, when you think about digital and talk to Lee's mom in Chatsworth, she's like, Lee, what about security? I'm scared about my ID. It is very scary right now. I just released stats around digital fraud, and that's available if the audience wants it. I can distribute that via Aya and the Percosa team. But here's a couple interesting stats. In the 1 year since Q2 last year, online casinos, the amount of digital fraud has gone up over 900%, 900%, right? On a monthly basis, the top 3 online casinos have over 1 million unique visitors. Now we're looking for ways to go online, to de-stress, to find a way, even though it's tough, maybe I should take a chance. Now fraud is creeping in. Fraud is a mega industry. In 2021, this year, fraud will cost the global cybercrime will cost us $6 trillion. That's the cost to companies, the world, in terms of cybercrime. In South Africa, online gambling, digital fraud attempts gone up by 922%. Travel and leisure, fake websites to book trips, well over 300%. Online communities where you want to socialize, share photographs, share your information, gone up by well over 200%. These are the top 3 areas where digital fraud has increased. Now, why am I trying to scare you? I'm scaring you because we need to move to a response. From a security perspective, you've got to be proactive. You can't be defensive and say, maybe when it happens to me, I'll do something. What is the cost of data breach? What is the cost of a consumer's personal information, of your information being out there? When you think about security, consumers are saying, I want to transact digitally. I want to be able to be online and never leave my house. And I have options. I have 5 retailers and I've got an e-commerce player. Why should I choose you over you over you? And that's an important point. If you remember what I said earlier, if the consumer is the king or the queen or the decider of your success, how do you show up? Remember what I said at the very beginning, 7 out of 10 consumers are looking for trust. They don't know what we stand for. In my case, I want businesses to stand for protecting my interests, making me feel safe, taking accountability. You've all watched Carte Blanche and you hear of people saying, no, something goes wrong. It must be somebody else's fault, never our fault. As we think about our business, how do we show up in this world ahead? Okay, let's just move ahead quite quickly. As we wrap up, I've used this word outcomes probably 2 or 3 times today. As you know, I'm a trained consultant, very analytical, lots of frameworks and outputs and deliverables. I realized many years ago that those outputs don't really matter. Those slides, those Excel documents, it matters in terms of helping us inform things. But in the end, it's the outcome that matters. And outcome is solving a real problem. It's about empowering someone to go to university for the first time, getting their first car, having food on a daily basis. That's what matters. Our slides, our PowerPoint, our presentations, it doesn't matter. This presentation, it doesn't matter. If all I do is spur you on to think about our relevance as humans, knowing that humans are vulnerable, humans don't have the answer, but we can think about our collective and our individual responsibility. We can think about, is it about the dollars and the rands and the cents? Is that what really matters? Or is there something more? So when you think about outputs, ask yourself, what is the problem I'm really solving? Are we rushing to finish that deliverable because somebody asked for it? Or do I understand the bigger picture? For me, when I think about South Africa and I think about the fact that we've got 27.2 million people that use credit every day, 75% of their income every month goes to servicing debt. They are highly indebted. They're struggling right now. Can I find a way to say to somebody in a township, I see you then more than just as a number. I see the real Lee, the real Sylvan, the real Aya. I see you as a human that has potential, or do I see you as a number? For me, I feel that's my calling. While I'm in charge of TransUnion, I have a privilege as long as they allow me to. Can I make a difference, an outcome that matters? We're saying we want a better life for all people. That's not NDP 2030, right? If that's not NDP, what role do I play? What is my purpose? So that's the discussion that we're really having. The world has changed. It doesn't go back to Feb 2020. If you've got a calendar reminder to say, wait one more week, wait one more month. I need to be honest and say the world doesn't change. It evolves and it will move to a new level. It's what we call jumping this S curve. It's moving into a new era, a new way of working. It's that revolution. It's a big seismic event that's happened. And I guess the one question to leave us all on, if you think about how the world has changed and how it won't go back to pre-COVID days, we think about this hyper-connected reality, the fact that consumers and citizens have a lot more control, a lot more power. We've got to surely ask ourselves, can we stop? Can we pause? Can we reflect and ask ourselves, can we take advantage of maybe the silver linings of an opportunity to transform, to be relevant, to help us to become pandemic proof on the other side? What choices will I make? Who can I partner with? Am I crying by myself and I can conquer a problem where I need to partner? How can I be part of the sharing economy? Maybe I have something to give to you to share with the economy. Maybe you have something that could share with me and my business and other businesses. How do we collectively come together to make that happen? With that, that is the end of my presentation. Final words are that if you do have a question, there's a lot of content. Everything I've presented today is written up somewhere on my LinkedIn profile. So follow that, look me up if you're struggling, ask Aya if you want. We will send the slides out, absolutely. So have no doubt about that. But it's been a pleasure being hosted by Selvan and the POCO team. So thank you for that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity, Aya.
Thank you very much, Lee, for your insightful presentation. I think I don't only speak for myself, but for all the colleagues attending this session when I say all of us have taken away something to ponder about from your presentation. So we can now take some questions. I'll hand over to Jody Lee and she will field some questions that we received in the chat box. And then after that, we will commence with the lucky prize draw. Thank you, Jody.
Thanks, Aya. Lee, one of the questions that we've got here is with the increase in digital crime and fraud, where are the cyber police, the South African cyber police in all of this? I think maybe they're asking where they fit in.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the answer is not as clear as one would like it. Digital fraud is getting more and more renewed interest in South Africa. There are several bodies coming up that are emphasizing the need for protection. So whether it's the King for governance mechanisms, or whether it's the fact that we have something called South African Fraud Prevention Services, one of my biggest advices to anyone as a consumer or as a business, if you hear of someone that's become involved in digital fraud, Jody, the very first thing to do is call South African Fraud Prevention Services and file for something called protective registration. That's actually the very first part in that process, right? And that allows you to then minimize any impact that your identity may have out there. It's also important to note that you can't control where your identity goes because it's being used in transactions all the time. There are many leaks and breaches you've heard of. And the question is, if it's out there, how does one protect themselves? I would say, Jody, just as a summary point, there's a lot more to do. Many of the key bodies that relate to consumer industries are starting to come together, but we don't have that focused, elaborate, cybercrime force. It is part of the security capabilities where they partner globally with looking at things in the dark web and the underground. But there are private sector bodies like TransUnion and other players that are starting to actually bring out, opportunities. We actually have a product, just by way of example, that actually scans the dark web of the internet and lets you know as a consumer if your information ends up there. Because when stuff happens out in the marketplace, Jody, it doesn't actually end up on a website that you can see. It ends up in a place where people can buy it. When I talk about 922% increase in online gambling, it's scary as to how people do it. They go off and buy databases with your information. They go and buy credit card information. They will load a credit card amount onto a website and then do a refund into their own account. It's super sophisticated. Yeah. What I would say is that my presentation, many of the people like me, the hope is to give us more education. But I would say equally so, we also need to take responsibility as consumers, because if we are participating in the digital world, we need to meet the banks and meet the retailers halfway, find the products, talk to your bank, talk to your credit bureau. There are many things that help you become more aware of cybercrime and how it relates to you.
Yeah. I'm sure, I mean, the POPI Act that has just come into play, last month, has a lot to do with this as well. I mean, I'm sure it plays a big role in protecting your personal information against security fraud as well. It's not just about being irritated by marketers, but it's actually about your own security of personal information too.
Well, it's actually a really good point. Maybe it's worth noting a couple of things. When you think about the increase in gambling and online communities in travel and leisure, there's been a marked decrease in 3 key areas: financial services, telco, and retail. Now,
Wow.
why is that important? One would argue that these are the economic infrastructure powerhouses that need to be compliant with the Companies Act, with the King Report, and now with POPIA.
Yeah.
There's lots more investment to make sure that when you transact, the protection is in place. And remember what I said earlier, I'm going to choose the bank or the retailer that puts my interest first. If they're not going to be secure, I'm going to leave them like a hot pocket. I'm going to go to the next place because I have more choices.
Yeah.
That's an important thing. People have choices. You know, 20 years ago, there's one telco. There's a few banks. Everyone's a bank. Everyone's a telco. We have retailers becoming telcos, telcos becoming banks. I have options. And in that time, we can never, ever, Jody, take for granted the loyalty of a customer. Remember what I said earlier, in the first 6 months of the pandemic, 45% of transactions moved from retailers and banks onto the intermediaries. And the question is, does Lee really like the intermediaries? And maybe he'll never go back. I don't know. I'm a loyal guy. Maybe I will go back. But maybe the younger ones won't do so.
Yeah. That's a very interesting point. I mean, it's made everything a lot more competitive, and everybody's got to actually up their game a bit, I think. So there's another question here. It's tricky to innovate, or rather a comment, tricky to innovate in a bureaucratic environment. Do you have any advice about that?
It's a really interesting point. So I've actually joined a business that is 120 years old. I would say not only are we a bureau, we are very bureaucratic in our ways of thinking and working. It's interesting, right? So I can have a million ideas, so could you. The question, though, is how does one convince somebody it makes sense? So when you think about convincing somebody, think about outputs versus outcomes. If you go to your boss and say, listen, boss, I have an amazing idea. And lots of guys come to me and say, Lee, I have an amazing idea. And I'll say, why should I care? It sounds very arrogant. Why should I care? So you think about innovation, it's actually a journey. Someone like myself that only gets measured on 2 KPIs, revenue and margin. No one asks me how good is my innovation. I'm expected to be innovative. If you can tell me as a leader of the business, this idea I have will impact us in this way, it'll impact us in that way, it'll reduce those costs. Guess what? I will give you an entire day to stop and talk about your idea. Now, you may say leaders need to all be open. No, leaders don't need to all be open. Leaders are protecting employment, protecting our businesses' going concerns. I stress about employees I have in 8 different countries. Can I pay them every month? Am I good to go? I don't care about innovation. If innovation helps me pay them, I'm all ears. I'll give you my entire week that'll help. So I would say, think about it with that lens and flip the hat. I was the guy that's bringing innovative ideas. Now I'm the other guy, right? And the other guy is a difficult punk, right? I don't have any time for anything. And that's not true. I'm a very nice guy. However, if you have an idea and I have limited time, why should your idea make sense? So this one buzzword I want to leave with you on this comment. The language that you speak is not the language I speak. What is our common language, right? So if you're talking ones and zeros because you're a techie, or if you're talking finance, I'm not a finance guy. If you're talking about, I don't know, qualifications, I'm not a qualifications guy. What is the language I'm talking? If you can find a common language, so if I'm talking Hindi and you're talking Afrikaans, but we both can speak English, if we talk English, we'll have a productive conversation.
We're going to get each other.
Yeah. So you got to find your boss. And I think, for my people, I've been there 5 years. They didn't know me. Some people have been there for 40 years. I've had to meet them halfway to learn their language. They've had to meet me and say, why is a new guy, an outsider, coming to take over? Put the effort in if you want to innovate. Don't be despondent because it's meant to be difficult, right? If you want to really be successful, you've got to find a way to put the effort in.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Okay, another question here from Alette. She says entrepreneurship is considered a magic wand. Do you think the way we think about entrepreneurship will change under the uncertainty that we work in? I think she's saying sort of about how we think about entrepreneurs. Is that going to change?
So that's a really good question, because I would argue that entrepreneurship, the way you refer to it, Alette, is a mindset. So the business I joined, it's an entrepreneurship. Things are changing all the time. Things are broken. There's more sticky tape than I would care for. And I come from a seasoned, big five consulting firm where things need to work like that. The question is, if it's about the outcome, Alette, right? Do you want to spend 19 years on the output and not deliver on the outcome? So I've had to learn, even myself as a leader, to be honest, on how to be calmer with not being perfect, because you don't care about perfect as a consumer. You care about value and return on value, right? So for me, it's a mindset. Is it overhyped? I actually don't think so. And I'll give you a data point. 60% of employment in South Africa comes from SMMEs. Why is there a TERS fund? Why is every government saying, let's put a policy to help small people, micro, medium, etc.? That's where the employment comes from, 60%. When I first presented the analysis on the COVID pandemic back in April last year, that's the first thing that struck out to me. The reason why governments are saying SMMEs and entrepreneurs is that's where the employment happens, right? We've got 7.8 million unemployed people today. I can't create 1 million jobs, but I would bet 1,000 small 2-person companies could create 5-person jobs, and that could roll. And that's why they're saying it. Is it a buzzword? I fully agree with you. Everybody wants to talk about entrepreneurship. Let's change the way we work. Let's not use suits. No one cares about the suit. We care about value. The question is, are you communicating in the right language?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we're nearly just about done. We've got to go on to our raffle in a minute. But there is quite a good question here that I'd like to put to you. Sorry, Aya. There is one last good question here. I know that we're running out of time. Since we're all seeking growth in business, but with 4IR coming on board, a lot of things are now mostly digital. Their concern is that 2 in 10 websites are hacked. So do you still think it is a good idea to be going digital?
100%. It's very simple. I've changed how I shop. You've changed how you shop. Will you really want to stand in a line at a bank if the bank can come to you, right? Will you want to go stand in a clothing shop when a shop says, if you don't like it, I'll come and take it back free of charge 100 times over, and I'll never say no to you, right? In terms of my personal satisfaction points, I want instant gratification. So the point is not that it's a bad thing. You got to change your posture as a business leader. Listen, I have probably the biggest data assets in the country. My biggest amount of spending goes on security, right? We are nervous all the time because being nervous keeps us on our edge, right? Keeps us focused and being better. We're never complacent. In fact, security doesn't even report to me because I could be part of the problem. It reports to a global board, right? Let's just check this Leonard guy, looks suspicious. That's part of what it takes to work in a digital world. There's no turning back, my friend. We've got to change the way we work. We've got to embrace the new world. But the final point is, I know Aya is begging to go online. The final point is that why do it by yourself? I don't do it by myself. And I'm a big data organization. I partner with experts that bring the best of them to my business. And I hope to bring the best of my business to other businesses. That's my value proposition. Yeah. It starts with making some tough decisions as you reflect on where you are as a business. Yeah. Hopefully that's useful. Thank you so much.
That is. That's a perfect note to end off on. Thank you so much, Lee. Lovely to have you. Really great to listen to you.